A very warm welcome to all our Millennium Fellows joining us from around the world. My name is Tiana Joseph, and I serve as a campus director at Stella Maris College in Chennai, India. I'll be your moderator for today's global webinar, and thank you so much to all of you for being here with us. Today's session is part of our Millennium Fellowship Global Webinar Series, where we connect with leaders and change makers who are driving social impact in powerful ways. Before we begin, I would love to know where everyone is joining us from. Fellows, please take a moment to drop your name, country, and university in the chat box. And if anyone is comfortable, feel free to unmute and quickly introduce yourselves. We would love to hear from you. Hi, we have Evans from Ghana. Hi, we have Charity. Hi, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name right. Ephraim from Ghana as well. Hi, we have Diti from India. Hi, we have Esna from Kenya. Lady Zabhar. Hi, we have Ridoy Mondol from the University of Rajshahi, Bangladesh. Hi, we have Abena Beko, if I'm not wrong, from Ghana. Hi, we have Olayami from Nigeria, Oscar from Nigeria. We have Orioluwa from Nigeria as well. Rupali Naidu from Bangladesh. We have Angela from Uganda, Isaac from Nigeria, Wilson from Canada, Grace from Nigeria, Jajana from Bulgaria, Alina Yasin from Pakistan, George Asante from USA, Shamin from Kenya. We also have Rohit Meena from National Law University from India, Victoria from Nigeria. It's now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker for today, Ms. Kathryn Tan, Programs Director at the National Basketball Players Association Foundation. Kathryn has been part of the NBPA Foundation since 2019, where she leads programs that support player philanthropy and manages the foundation's grant portfolio. Before joining NBPA, she worked at Arabella Advisors, advising philanthropists and corporations on global impact strategies, including designing a 5 million mental health grant-making framework. Kathryn is a graduate of UCLA and also serves as co-chair of Peak Grant-Making Northeast Chapter Membership Committee and treasurer for the Breakout Foundation. We are honored to have her here with us today to share insights from her incredible journey in philanthropy, leadership, and impact. Kathryn, thank you so much for being here. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Tia, and hi everyone. I'm glad to have a global audience today. I'm calling in from New York City, and I call New York and Los Angeles home, and excited to speak with you all today and share a little bit more of my work and my day-to-day, and happy to answer any questions that come up. But first, I would really like to thank MCN and the team for having me join you all today. It's such a pleasure to be able to hopefully be a resource and just share a little bit more about my journey and how I got to where I am today. MCM is an incredible program. I wish that this program existed when I was back in school. Just hearing from the next generation of change makers and all of the work that you all are doing to change your community and make the world a better place. I'm really excited to learn more and hear more of your global work. So I'm happy to just start and share a little bit more about myself. And I'll just start with, I had no idea what I was doing and how I got here until I was actually doing it. So I had a very nonlinear path to get to where I am today. And I think it really started with the fact that I've been surrounded by social impact my entire life. I just didn't have the language for it, and I didn't really know what it was. So I'm actually the child of two refugees who fled a war and and met in the US and were here and actually did not speak that much English. And so I remember I went to a Title I high school and I was admitted to a public university, and I had no idea what social impact was, but I knew I was getting extra resources at school. I knew I was helping my parents learn how to speak English. And then when I got to UCLA in my university years, I was put in a program for first generation students. And I didn't really know what that meant. I had extra academic advising and mentorship and guidance because my family members had never gone through this process before. And I just thought everything was normal. But then I learned when I started working at a nonprofit as an intern during my college years that there's a broader world, and that philanthropy and nonprofit work has actually been there every step of the way. This really came to light, and this is like a moment of honesty for me. This really came to light when I was in my last semester or quarter at college, and I had a family member get sick, and I had to somehow graduate while I was flying back and forth between the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was in a nonprofit that provided space for individuals impacted by a sick family member. It was right outside the hospital, and I had the opportunity to they cooked meals for me. There was someone there to help me with my papers. There was someone there for me the full time when I was going through this process. And I didn't realize it yet, but they actually were the reason that I graduated. And that was because of a nonprofit that someone started and the work that someone has put in and philanthropic funding has put in. And that translated to where I am today. I didn't realize that social impact had been touched every part of my career. And then when I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but that I wanted to make an impact, and there was no path carved out for me. So I started at Arabella Advisors. It's a philanthropic consulting firm, and I worked in a practice focused on ultra high net worth individuals, which is very consultant jargony, but it was really focused on those who had inherited money or were the next generation of philanthropists that you see now. And I didn't realize what the work was until I was actually doing it. I was working with foundations, corporations, and donors who wanted to give strategically and wanted to make a difference in the communities that they cared about. But because of their privilege and being able to sit in this space, they didn't necessarily have an idea of, if we fund an after school program, does it really matter if we do X, Y, and Z? And I actually had that perspective so I could provide it to the donors that I was working with. And so that's when I started to realize, I know your theme right now is power and purpose. That's when I started to realize that I might not have the capital to give away, but I could provide a perspective because I was lucky enough to sit at this table with people actually asking, how do you make an impact in the community that you care about? And they were asking from a community perspective, but we know that those tables are really hard to find or sit at. And that's really also what taught me that philanthropy isn't just about money. It's about thinking about the system, the strategy, and building relationships and working in the community so you could really build that ecosystem of support. So about 6 years ago, I actually found an opportunity to bring that work to the sports space. And now I'm at the National Basketball Players Association Foundation. So this is a foundation that's an extension of the union for professional basketball players. So if they're signed with one of the 30 NBA market teams, then they get access to these resources. I say that the fun fact about this work for any of the basketball fans out there is, if you've seen a player get fined on the court, that fine money actually goes back to us. Half of it goes back to the NBA for their social responsibility initiatives, and the other half comes to us. And so what we do here is, as an extension of a union, we provide resources to help players think through their community footprint and what they want to do, both here in the US and also abroad. About 27% of the league is international or has international roots outside of the US. And we really try to honor that work and be responsible stewards and help the players be responsible stewards of the power that they have as public figures and athletes, and also as like young philanthropists in their own right. The thing that I've learned is the question that every social impact person should ask at some point, and that I've asked through my journey is, what do I care enough about to stick with even when the work gets hard? And I think my journey has really brought me to a moment where I realize that I can get to be in these spaces so I can help be the bridge for amazing grassroots organizations or amazing work that's being done and help translate it to individuals who might not have access to what that looks like on the day to day. And my day to day is really varied. I can sit on a call with a player, which might not be as it's actually not as glamorous as you think. Usually they're on the way to the gym or they have very busy day jobs. Um, or I might be working with their family or their partner to really think through what the next level of impact can be. I've worked as a grants manager and grants overseer, a program officer, and now I'm focused on building programs to help the next generation of athlete philanthropists to really think through what their impact could be. So it's not funding one giant nonprofit that has a global footprint, which we know has incredible reach, but we really want to think about how are we supporting folks from the ground and empowering the next generation of leaders. Throughout my experience, I've learned that my lived experience is something that's like unique to me and something that you can always bring to the table that no one else has. I still have imposter syndrome a lot of the time, but then there are moments where I realize that everything that we experience on the day-to-day, what we put into our social impact work, that always translates to something that's really unique about you. And I know we talk a lot about investing in the next generation of leaders, and I'm reminded that I also am one of the leaders and I need to invest in myself and also take risks and bet on myself. And that's a lesson that I've really learned throughout my career. And that your path is definitely not linear and you should take chances when you can. I had no idea that I would, if you told 22-year-old me that was at UCLA, hey, you're going to one day work with athletes to help them with their philanthropy, I would probably laugh. I did not know this was an actual career that I could build. But I've learned to just say yes to things along the way just to expand my network and learn. And just really try to be the best global citizen that I can. So whenever the opportunity comes up, because you never know what work can look like and how everything ties together in our ecosystem, how to really bring that to the table. So that's the overview of my work and everything that I've done to date. But really happy to learn more about you all and then provide as much insight as I can.
Thank you so much, Kathryn, for those really inspiring insights, especially on your journey. I'll now proceed to ask a few questions before we open the floor for our fellows' questions as well. This is also a gentle reminder to all our fellows from around the world to drop in your questions to Kathryn in the chat box. We'll begin. A lot of us Millennium Fellows are just figuring out our future career paths. As undergraduates passionate about social impact, it's often difficult to merge that passion with our professional goals. Could you share how you were able to connect your academic journey with your career in social impact, grant making, and philanthropy?
Happy to. So another layer in there is I actually have my bachelor's of science in biology from UCLA. So I really had a non-traditional path where a lot of my colleagues in this space studied international development or nonprofit finance or business. I explored what public health would look like. I explored what other careers, if you follow a STEM path, what that could be. And then I learned that there are services that are focused in the pathway that I took as a young person. So what I was able to figure out is that there's a philanthropic angle and nonprofit work for just about anything. And to the unique lived experience, I learned when I was working with folks who did research that, oh, I was in a chem lab and I did that type of research. So I understood a specific like scientific study, if it was a medical study or a study on the progression of a disease and how a virus or medication can interject in between and serve as like a possible solution or medicine, I was able to bring that lens into the work. And that's also something that isn't necessarily, I won't say as common, but some people don't necessarily think about it. And I took like what I learned in the classroom, which sometimes is hard to translate, it's very theoretical, but all these things are kind of the inception point for, or all the theoretical is like the inception point for what you're practicing in everyday life. So I just had to take a step back and really think about what is the project and task at hand and how can I merge my academic experience with it. And so when I was working with a climate funder, because I studied biology, I had an idea of like what plant species we should be looking at or what should make sense. And so it was really like thinking about all the strengths that I had through my academic career and then tying it to different pieces to my work across like the journey that I have. So recently I actually worked with our union and the players to host a pitch competition for impact investing across the African continent. So we focused on 6 countries where our players have ties, and then we brought in a nonprofit startup from each of those countries. And 2 of the nonprofits, the 2 winning nonprofits actually, were science or STEM-based startups. And so I had a unique perspective on it that my other colleagues who studied different things didn't necessarily have. So it was really just thinking through like, what have I done in my academic career and like, how does that apply to the everyday work? Because as we know, social impact, it's an entire ecosystem. So anything that you do academically will translate over.
It was really great hearing your perspective. Many of us fellows are starting out with social impact projects and often find fundraising or finding collaborators quite challenging. What advice would you give young leaders taking their first steps towards funding and partnership building?
Yeah, so for fundraising, I think the most important thing is being able to tell your story and have it be authentic to you. Um, Funders get asks from a million different directions. So it's always most helpful to really hear where there's alignment across your work and what's authentic to it. So one of the funders that I've like worked with for a long time, her focus was environmental health. And so for her, she had a personal story related to it. So when she tells her story, that's where she's able to garner additional support for the projects that she wants to fund. So when she talks about exposure to toxic chemicals and how that has impacted her health and her life, that's how she's been able to connect with other foundations or funders who want to come in and maybe co-fund a program that she's doing. And I say the same thing for the athletes that we're working with. We have players who they may have a parent or a family member who's impacted by cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia. They may have, I just learned that there was a player who had actually he had a bone transplant when he was younger. And so that's all a part of his authentic story. And then when he tells his story, that's the thing that funders really look for. It's, is this engaging? Is it authentic? And is it true to the work that you're doing? And once you have that connectivity and you can tell that story, then that's how you can build the relationships and bring other funders on board.
That was really a very interesting perspective, especially for those looking towards funding and partnership building. Before I proceed to the next question, this is just a small reminder to all our fellows to please drop in your questions as well in the chat box. Thank you. I'll now proceed to the next question. You have been in the philanthropy space for several years, I believe. What key transformations have you observed in the recent years, and how can young leaders leverage these evolving priorities in grant making and social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, great question. So in the philanthropic space, I've seen a big change over the past couple of years. I think one is acknowledging the political state of the world right now is very different from when I started my career over a decade ago. I don't believe I'm saying that. Over a decade ago when I started my career, things looked very different. And I think right now, the biggest trend that I'm seeing is that there is a generation that has a lot of resources that is thinking through how to invest in the next generation. And I haven't seen that before. I'm really seeing how can we open pathways for the next range of change makers coming into this space. And I've seen the definition of social impact change as well. So I call it traditional philanthropy or traditional grant making, where you have a large institutional foundation that is giving money to support one specific program, and grant sizes can range. Um, but over the past couple of years, I've seen that look different. I worked with startups that are thinking about entrepreneurship in a different way. I've seen money go back into the community. How are we investing in the next generation of leaders? Does it make sense to, we've seen some grants that are very restrictive, but does it make sense to just give leaders money and figure out what they need to do with it? At my work with the Breakout Foundation, we had a funding program and our funding programs change over time, but we once had a funding program where we were saying, let's just give unrestricted grants to people, and those change makers can figure it out. And it can be, will this $5,000 go toward the rent, supplies you have to buy? Will it go toward making sure that you can pay the electric bill to keep your lights on? What does that trust look like? And what does that investment look like? It isn't a traditional grant of you have to support an after school program that looks exactly like this. And investing in that flexible capital is something that I've seen grow a lot over time. I'm sure you've heard the phrase in your classes, trust-based philanthropy, and we're seeing that shift of, instead of just focusing on the program, which is very important, how are we focusing on the people that are taking that on, who are doing the program, and who are the ones that are interfacing directly with the community that need it the most. I think young leaders and youth initiatives should really, or youth-led initiatives should really think through, how am I showing up in the community and how does that translate, and what are the unique things that I'm bringing to the table? Because there is this shift of not thinking about philanthropy in a very traditional way, I would really think about what makes your work unique and what makes you unique, and how are you doing this work in the community that's different from everyone else? How are you building partnerships and bringing people to the table that's different from everyone else? And what does that mean to have that investment? I think sometimes funders need to gently be told, like, this is what your money would go toward. So if um, you are working with a foundation that maybe it falls a little outside of the grant making area, like really think through, like, where's the alignment and what trust is possible to build, and how can you really bring your unique perspective and what you have to the table to help usher in and really bring in that trust, that level of trust to do the work that needs to be done. I mentioned a little bit about a nonlinear path, and I think philanthropy is slowly getting more comfortable with a nonlinear path because that's how the world is. Like, there isn't a straight line from A to B. So what does that look like in practice? And sometimes they just need encouragement to be able to take a risk or take a bet on you, and then you'll be able to hopefully secure more dollars for your project.
Thank you so much for that insight. That was really refreshing. Sustaining long-term relationships is crucial in this field. What's your advice for ensuring that relationships with communities and collaborators remain strong and lead to meaningful, lasting impact?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is meeting people where they are. And meeting funders and communities where they are. How you talk to a funder is very different from how you're talking to someone in the community, is very different to how you're talking to a fellow nonprofit or a fellow institution that's doing the work. I think it's important to understand what communication methods work best. I work with nonprofits all the time where I say, just send as much information. And this is my personal style. I say, send as much information as you have, and I'll take a look at it and hopefully be able to connect the dots. But that doesn't work for everyone. I know some funders say, like, just send me a quarterly report or send me your annual report. Some nonprofits, because you want to be careful to not overburden a nonprofit, say, like, actually, can you condense it or make things look a certain way? Like, what is the way of communication that resonates the most for the folks that you're working with? And I really think that's how you really build that trust and relationship. Sometimes you can ask a question and you may not get an answer for a few months, but if you ask the question and you build that relationship, sometimes that is the best way that a funder functions. So even just asking the question of, hey, I have information that I want to share on my social impact initiative. What is the most effective way for me to share that? For you, asking that question and opening up the door to conversation, that's usually how you really sow those seeds. And sometimes you just send things out into the universe and then things will eventually come back and everything will all work out in the end. But it's really understanding where your audience is and how do you meet them there. I know on the community side, sometimes it is checking in with the community every week, every other week, depending on the type of work you do. It can be more intensive, but once you have that trust built, that's the thing that's really going to propel your work forward and open the door to future collaborations. You never know what type of work might come up for a funder or fellow organization that can really resonate with them in the future.
Thank you so much. That was really refreshing. Thank you so much, Kathryn, for this question and answer session. We'll now move on into our open Q&A session. Fellows, this is your chance to engage directly with Kathryn. Please drop your questions in the chat box, and I'll call on to you to unmute, introduce yourselves with your name, country, and university, and ask your questions. If anyone is having any technical issues, there's no worries. I can read your question on your behalf. I believe there's a question from Saida. How do you believe social entrepreneurship can effectively drive meaningful change in international development amongst diverse communities? How do you think the diversity in communities affects grant making?
Okay, so for the first part of that question, I think social entrepreneurship, it breeds innovation and it allows for someone to ask other questions. I think if we break out of traditional models of what philanthropy looks like, there's the opportunity to really think about what innovative solutions can be to a problem. And I think social entrepreneurship is the perfect way to think about it. And you have the ability to do good while also doing well. I think for so long, the definition of charity and philanthropy has been funders give, and that's as far as it goes. But there's a way where everyone can benefit in the future if social entrepreneurship can really grow to where it has the potential to. And if folks really want to invest in it, if this is your passion area, how are you investing in it? How are you bringing others along on your journey? For the diverse communities part, it all is about perspective. I think when you have only one perspective, there's no room for growth. I was actually having this conversation with someone the other day of like the importance of having, for lack of a better term, like having a little bit of friction and pushback. So if everyone's always agreeing, there is an element of comfort in that. But if you are able to like expand and grow your comfort zone, that's where there's a real element of growth and long-term sustainability to your solution. Having a singular perspective might be limiting for what possibilities are out there. And I think just having that diverse set of eyes on something is really important.
Thank you so much for that. I think there's a follow-up question from Saida as well. She asks, what do you wish you had done differently?
So I will say I wish that I took care of myself differently. And when I say that, I think when you are so driven and wanting to make the world a better place, you forget that you are the one doing the work and taking on a little bit of that burden. And sometimes as much as I take my job and my work very seriously, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I should have taken that break. I should have taken that vacation when I should have. And I think investing in yourself is equally as important as investing in your work. And that's something that because I took a nonlinear path, I was so determined to get to the end point that I never took a step back while I was on the journey to really take stock in myself and reflect. I'm much better at it now, but I think throughout the journey, it's sometimes I would look at something like, oh, I'm not sure that's for me, or "Oh, I can't take a break today. I have to focus on this work." And if I just said yes to more things and kept my mind and heart more open, I'm not sure I would probably still be here, but have another set of experiences that would be really enriching.
Thank you so much. I hope that answers your question, Saida. There's another one from Emanuela. How can young change makers effectively build collaborations when they have limited resources or connections?
This is the hardest part. I felt that way too. I think it goes back to just saying yes to the things that may not squarely fall into the work that you're doing. I'll share, like, I interned at a nonprofit that was focused on water access. And then I interned at another nonprofit focused on the reduction of HIV transmission. And then I was debating on if I go into public health. And then I played around with climate work. So I really just tried a little bit of everything, and then slowly over time was able to build my network and set of resources to be able to get to where I am now. It is really difficult. And I think when I learned that hurdles weren't limiting, but just more of a way to really rethink what I wanted to do or reframe it, that's when I found myself like feeling like less limited and more even excited. But I felt myself like getting closer to actually where I wanted to go because I had other steps along the way and was able to build outside of what I squarely wanted to do. And I would also just take a chance. You never know. Sometimes when I was looking for a job my first time around, I sent out probably over 100 emails and I would get one response. So it really is like taking a chance on yourself and then seeing who's willing to have the conversation and be open.
Thank you so much. I think there's another question from Emanuela as well. What are some common mistakes people make when trying to form partnerships, and how can we avoid them?
Yes. So I know for me, and I'm speaking for me, sometimes if you're over emailing or over following up, it makes it a little harder. And I think it's because the hardest part of my work is saying no. So if I have to keep saying no, then I think it sometimes can erode or diminish the relationship. So I that is one thing that I've had one nonprofit. I'm pretty sure they're using AI to send this email. They've sent emails over and over again proposing their project. And I don't want to say no to any project, but I have a set of guidelines that I need to follow. I have a board that I have to report to with how we're spending down funding. So the over follow-up makes me less inclined to engage with the organization because I have to say no over and over again. So I would recommend understanding where the funder or partner is coming from, because sometimes, as much as it's great to have a lot of communication, you don't want to push the communication too far. And I know for me, I don't want to waste a nonprofit's time. I don't want them to waste our team's time because we're considering something that might not be a fit. Um, so I would be cautious of like doing too much follow-up and really understanding what the limits of the person that you're talking to is. It's a little bit of it really is understanding your audience.
There's one final question from Emanuela. In your experience, how can social innovation initiatives be sustained beyond the initial excitement or funding phase?
Oh, that's a good question. It's hard. I think transparently and honestly, there are days where I'm like, this is tough. Like, there are days where I feel like, what is the point of the work that we're doing? I think allowing yourself to feel that has helped me. I know that sometimes if I just let myself feel down about the state of the world for one day, then I have enough energy to make it to the next day to continue the work. So I think it's just allowing yourself to go through the motions of whatever it is. that's how you can sustain the same level of enthusiasm. Because if you're pulling energy out of yourself to try to stay excited about a project from start to end, at the end of the project, you're not going to have any more energy to actually continue on to what is next, or even enjoy the progress that you've made so far. So it really is just leaning into, okay, today is a tough day, but tomorrow is a new one. And that can last for a couple days, that can last for a week, but it's really being in tune with yourself for the project. And it's also having a North Star. So you know where you want to be, and it's okay that the path to get there isn't a straight path.
Thank you so much, Kathryn, for the answers, and Emanuela for the questions. There's one from Carly as well. How should someone begin to look for funders if they are not really sure where to start?
I have to say it depends on your geography. I will have, I can share more of like the US based context and some of the context that I've learned from my global work. On the global side, I know it's a little harder, but looking at what government resources are out there, throughout my government work, I've learned that there are more government resources than not. And then usually when you start that Google search of, oh, who has this embassy worked with? Oh, they worked with this partner or this partner. And then you can start to make those connections. Um, I know for when we were working on a project with the French government, which that's a whole different conversation, but they actually partnered with this other organization. And when I looked at that organization, I was like, oh, that's interesting. They have a CSR, a corporate social responsibility arm focused in X, Y, and Z. And they worked with this funder. So I think just starting with one entity, I use the government example because it's something I've actually done in my work. But if you start with one entity and kind of look at their other partners and who's in their sphere, you can start to expand and see what the other types of work look like. I would also open up financial capital is extremely important, but I would also open up your definition of what fundraising is. Are there other things that you need? I've asked this question a few times to nonprofit partners I've worked with. I've had a partner say like, actually, like money is great and we'll always want funding, but what I need computers because I have to run this program and I don't have computers to be able to run this program. So I think being open to those things is a good way to start. And then from the US, there's something called GuideStar or Candid. And then you can look at all the foundations. There's something called a 990. It's an American tax return that you can look at, and you can actually see where public organizations have given funding to other nonprofits or other partners before. But it's just really starting with that research. And once you have one locus of focus, you can expand from there and see where the potential partners are.
Thank you so much for that. There's one from Sandra as well. How can one move an idea to a project with limited resources? They believe they're finding it a bit difficult.
I one step at a time, I think is the biggest piece. I I set a lot of mini milestones for myself to get to the bigger milestone. So if you have an idea, my way of doing it is I just think of, okay, if this is the end point, what are the two to three midpoints I have, and what are the small steps I have to take there? I just break it down into smaller pieces and then celebrate the accomplishments of those milestones. And then really think through, okay, so now that I've done this, what is next? And I would also say don't be afraid of failure. I don't like to admit it, but I have failed at things before. But with everything I've learned something new. And to not have that fear, it's something I'm still working on, but it also helps if you have limited resources of like, okay, I wanted this, I have this, so I'm going to try X, Y, and Z instead. And sometimes you never know where that will have you land.
Thank you so much for that. There's one from Eric as well. What are some key areas that funders look for in the project proposal during evaluation? Are there
Mhm.
projects that carry more weight during evaluation?
Great question. So I can share what I look for. I look for one, the authenticity and community-based aspect of it. Are you telling the story and doing the work from an authentic place? And are you inclusive of the ecosystem that this project or solution is rooted in? And so are you, if it is a community health program, have you engaged with the constituents in the area? Do you have an understanding of the audience that you're working with? Are you looping in other partners along the way, or are you doing the work singularly? And depending on the project, you can approach it from different ways. But I think the first part is this project grounded in, I'll say, reality of this is the situation, and then these are the stakeholders involved in the work. So I really ask those questions of, is this work coming from a place where it has potential to be
I think Kathryn is having a little network issue, so I think we can hold on till she's able to get back. But in the meantime, Millennium Fellows, feel free to put your questions in the chat.
funders really look for a thorough understanding of how the funds will be used. So I find that having a project budget, I'm not passing any judgment on what a project budget is, but I just want to know where the funding is going. If the funding is supporting a salary, that's great. I just need to know that. If the funding is supporting a program, that's great. If the funding is going toward building infrastructure or going back into the community, it's having a clear understanding of where the funding is going. I think transparency is really important in the proposals. And I think to the question of like bringing an idea to impact, if you have an idea and a plan, I, as a funder, am open to funding that and supporting that. But I just need to know that you have a plan. I once worked with a nonprofit who wasn't transparent that they were still so in the idea phase that they didn't feel ready to move to the implementation phase. But because they didn't share that with me, that was actually very difficult for me to understand what was going on, to feel like I had trust in the organization. And they were scared that we would pull back funding, but they were inadvertently pushing us toward pulling back funding because we didn't know what was going on. So I think it's one, like, what is the community base for the solution? Are you really being inclusive? Two, having the project budget, and then three, just having like transparency and like where you are in the work. And then to the questions that we're asking about collaboration, that's how you can build that in your journey.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. That was really insightful. There's another question from Emanuela. How do you balance maintaining your organization's vision while aligning with partners who may have different goals?
Back to transparency. So I think that's one thing. I tend to be very direct. So if an organization isn't a good fit, I'll say, yes, this isn't a good fit at the time, but that's not saying that there isn't a good fit in the future. I think just maintaining that transparency and knowing that it's coming from a place of, I want to support the work, but I have my own limitations. I think that's like the biggest thing that you can do is just having that open level of communication.
That's really great. This is the last question from Gladys. Is it okay to register with the government at this small level or wait for when one's project has grown?
Oh, this one's tough. I don't know the context in which your work is operating in. I would just encourage you to see what's feasible for you, and even just putting the project out there. It may be beneficial, but I know every government entity works differently. I know some organizations you may want to trademark your work because there might be others doing similar work. And then for some organizations, they might wait until like the implementation phase. So I would look at, I would maybe see if there's another, if there's someone out there who's already done this work that you can ask these questions to that have that local context. But I think even putting the idea out there just for the future will be very helpful.
That's really interesting. I think we have one more question. I hope you don't mind. This one is from Mubarak. What's one thing you wish more people knew about social impact, and how can we work together to create positive change?
One thing people knew. Great question. I wish people knew that social impact, like any other industry, is a job. It's a full-time job. I think I sometimes get these messages of, oh, this looks so fun. You just go around and like take a photo with a giant check and do X, Y, and Z. But the social sector is an entire industry, just like the sports industry, just like the finance industry, just like the health industry. We have all of those things. They just have an impactful lean. And I wish more people understood that those who choose to work in this sector, like we have a mission, but it is a skill set just like anything else. Just because we're focused on social good doesn't mean we don't have all these other technical skills that other fields have. And I think folks are starting to learn that, but it's really interesting to see how when we say like, oh, I'm working on a social impact project, it sounds more like a passion project, but no, you have to know your financials. You have to know how to navigate X, Y, and Z. Have you done a project budget? Have you done a projection? Have you figured out how to write X, Y type of proposal? So it is an industry specific lean, just like everything else.
Thank you so much, Kathryn, for your valuable insights and warm responses. And I also want to thank all the Millennium Fellows who put forward their questions. We are coming close to the end of our time today. So, Kathryn, before we wrap up, would you like to share any final thoughts or advice for our Millennium Fellows?
I think one is I'm inspired by you all that you're here. I know that it is a competitive program and set across thousands of campuses across the world. So I think I'm just inspired and thankful that you took the time out of your day to hear me ramble for an hour. But I'm wishing you all the best of luck in your projects, and I'm excited to see the change that you're going to make in the world. I know that's a little corny, but I believe it's true.
Thank you so much, Kathryn, for this inspiring session and also for sharing such practical wisdom with our global cohort. Fellows, if you'd like to stay in touch with Kathryn, she'll be sharing her professional contact details in the private Zoom chat shortly. Before we close, a quick reminder. Our upcoming Millennium Fellowship webinars this week include Thursday, October 16th, session with Kavya Krishna, 11 a.m. to 20 p.m. Eastern Time, and Friday, October 17th, session with Christina Pogorevici, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Keep an eye on your inbox for more details. Thank you all once again for joining, for your energy as well as for your engagement. On behalf of the Millennium Fellowship, we wish you continued success as you lead change in your communities. Have a wonderful day or even evening, everyone. And thank you, Kathryn, so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. It was such a pleasure.